Hello and welcome to this brand new series on my YouTube channel. In it we will be looking behind the scenes of owning classic buses, what goes on and what needs doing. I'm also the chairman of two charitable trusts that run preserved buses, as well as I organise the Thanet Vintage Bus Running Day every year. So there'll be behind the scenes features on all of these as well. If you've ever wondered what goes into organising a running day or a bus rally or anything like that, stay tuned because there will be an episode on that later on. It's actually a lot more complicated than you'd actually begin to imagine. And on top of that, yes, there is actually even more. I actually drive buses commercially for a living, so maybe a little bit of that might feature as well in the forthcoming videos. But somebody once said that to go forward you have to go back, and that's exactly what I'm going to do now. So how did I become the bus nut that I am today? In this first episode we will look at that, and I shall also give you a bit of history on the collection of my vehicles. Now, whenever you speak to a transport enthusiast, whether they are interested in cars, buses, coaches, trains, boats, aircraft, there will always be a point in their life where they notice these things. They started to notice them, and this is what's caught their attention and their interest. With bus and coach enthusiasts, it tends to be a specific memory of maybe a vehicle that used to take them to school. Maybe it was a bus they travelled on when they were on holiday. Maybe they travelled on the vehicle every day for going to their first job. Now, these are all very personal memories and personal experiences, but it's surprising the amount of people that have those personal connections with vehicles, and this is where the love of the vehicles starts to build and starts to grow. For me, I first started to notice buses when I was aged about 4, and as a summer treat I would be taken down to the hoverport at Pegwell Bay at Ramsgate, and we would get on one of the old PFN open top AEC Regents of East Kent and ride through to Minnie's Bay, which when I was about 4 years old seemed like it was 100 miles away from Ramsgate. We would sit right up the front and I would hold on to that maroon handrail across the front windows and pretend to drive, which is something my present employer has asked me to stop doing because it unnerves the passengers. A year or so later, the AEC Regents finally gave way to 2 Leyland Atlanteans and a Bristol VR, and again I used to ride on those right from a very, very early age. And one particular memory was coming back from doing some shopping, and the open top bus route was the one that linked the town up to the nearest stop where I lived at the time. We went on the bus and we had to sit downstairs, and I was not a happy chappy about that. It was an open top bus and I wanted to sit upstairs and enjoy the sights and sounds. Nowadays, if you said to me, would you like to sit downstairs at the back of a Leyland Atlantean, I'd be only too happy to listen to those lovely engine noises. When I started school, it involved a bus journey, and I have fond memories of being taken to primary school on a very shiny new Bristol VR, and that Bristol VR was SKL 681X, but more on that one later on. I also remember one of the boxy looking Willowbrook bodied Bristol VR's TFN 980T. Most of the time though, my school bus consisted of a Daimler Fleetline with Park Royal bodywork, which had been new to East Kent in 1969 and was used initially to implement one-man operation across Thanet. By this point I was a full-blown bus enthusiast and also a fashion icon, as I created the hoodie movement, as you can see in this rather fetching picture of me. On various occasions I was taken up to Thanet Garage and always found myself seated in the cab of a Daimler Fleetline, and yet it's strange, I never actually took to these buses at all. I always preferred the Bristol VRs. So we go forward some 20 odd years and I'm now a fully qualified bus driver. This is my mum, my dad and myself celebrating at Thanet Garage. My dad worked hard, he was always tired. Oh, okay, I'll stop with the jokes. After a period of working in London for a couple of years, I moved back to Thanet and was driving buses there. And one of the buses I was driving was SKL 681X. Yes, the old Bristol VR was still there in service. And this was actually the first Bristol VR that I drove in service as well. Many of the drivers who used to drive my school bus were working there as well at this point, many of whom I became really good friends with. When SKL 681 was withdrawn in 2000, I put a bid in for her, and in 2001 she passed into my ownership. For a few years she was an only bus. But myself and my friend Maurice, who at that point owned TFN 980T, you see that one's reared its head again, bought former Good News bus FTU 392T, which was new to Crosville, as a source of spare parts, so I soon ended up with two buses. Now we soon discovered that FTU had very little in common with SKL or TFN, as it was a Leyland engine version of the Bristol VR. But to date, this without a doubt is the fastest Bristol VR I've ever driven. Maybe it was helped by the fact it didn't have any seats in it, so it was a little bit lighter, but it absolutely flew and went well above the legal speed limit, which I didn't realise at the time, honestly, officer. So FTU was passed on for further preservation. Sadly, though, she has bit the dust in latter years and doesn't survive anymore, which is a great shame. Now, after travelling on all those Daimler Fleet lines as a child, the next bus I owned was a Daimler Fleet line, but this was a DMS, and I've always had a soft spot for these much misunderstood buses. This particular one was DMS 550, and it was lingering in a yard not far from where we lived. And had I not bought it, it was due to be broken up by an excavator fairly soon. Knowing how rare the DMS buses were, I put my hand in my pocket and bought it, and it was a bit of a wreck, to be honest with you. There was a bee's nest in the back, there was an owl's nest at the front, and a mouse was living in the driver's seat. And on top of that, there'd been a fire at the rear end that had burnt through the wiring loom, so the gears didn't work. However, I managed to get all that sorted out and get it back to the garage. When East Kent's first Bristol VR MFN 41R came up for sale, I sold DMS 550 onto my friend Paul, who has performed an absolutely amazing restoration on a budget and got her back on the road, and she's absolutely stunning now and is a total credit to the hard work that he's put in. He's done most of the work on the bus himself, which is what's kept the costs of the restoration down. It's so nice to see Paul taking her out to shows and enjoying her, and the enjoyment that the bus brings to other people, and I'll always have a soft spot for this old bus. Meanwhile, I had gone from owning one bus to two buses to lots of buses, along with my friend Bernard, who has also been bitten by the bug. And in 2011 I formed the Southern Counties Omnibus Collection as a way of encompassing them all together and keeping them all under a collective umbrella. And I'm lucky to have some really lovely buses in the collection, and TFN 980T is part of the collection. There she is again. And while not all the buses are restored, they're all extremely loved and looked after, and the majority of them live undercover. I'm now living on the Isle of Wight, and slowly but surely I am moving them down here bit by bit, bus by bus, or coach by coach, as in the case of this one. The problem is with any move is over the years you accumulate lots of crap and lots of rubbish. Well, I say it's crap and it's rubbish, it's not really. It's things like spare parts, tyres, seats, seat cushions, seat frames, panels, windows, all sorts of things that you keep and you think, well, I'm going to use that one day. And to be honest with you, you probably won't. But they're also handy to keep in case you need anything. This is the thing with spare parts. Most of the time you tend not to need them, but when you get rid of them you will do, so I tend to hang on to them. And moving all these spare parts down to the Isle of Wight is going to be a bit of a logistical nightmare, but it will happen and I will get round to doing it eventually. But it's something that I'm not really looking forward to, sorting everything out, going through all my bits and pieces. Yeah, it gives me a headache just thinking about it, to be fair. Those of you who watch my videos regularly, and I know there's at least 2 of you, will have seen the adverts that I pop in every so often for Friends of the East Kent. I've been chairman of Friends of the East Kent since 2019, and this is another string to my bow and brings other vehicles under my care. These are much older than the ones I personally own though, and I certainly couldn't do all this without the great committee that I've got working with me at Friends of the East Kent. 2 of the main projects I'm currently involved with at Friends of the East Kent involve Open Top Guy Arab FFN 382, which was returned to Kent a few years ago, and AEC Swift VJG 187J, which again returned to Friends of the East Kent collection a couple of years ago. Both are needing major work, which I'm pleased to say on the Swift VJG 187J is well underway at last. And so this brings us up to date. I hope you enjoyed this video. In the next episode I will be looking at moving one of my Bristol VRs into a newly formed museum in Margate, as well as moving buses from Kent to the Isle of Wight. If you did enjoy this video, please like and share it amongst friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel as you'll receive notifications when I release future videos. And it also helps the channel grow because it encourages me to make more content like this. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.